I speak of Dido Harding, the Baroness, no less, who has been responsible throughout for the so-called test and trace system. She chose yesterday to describe it at a select committee hearing as a success. I shall say that again, in case anybody thinks they've woken up in a parallel universe. The Baroness, responsible for the test and trace system, yesterday described it as a success. She suggested that the media was to blame for the public expecting the system to have done better. Damn those pesky journalists, wondering whether or not it was reasonable to expect something akin to efficiency and effectiveness in return for a bill that is estimated to be set to end at £37 billion. £37 billion. Oh, speaking of large sums of money, do you think the final bill that the United Kingdom will have to pay to the European Union as a consequence of the withdrawal agreement that David Frost negotiated and Boris Johnson signed, do you think it will be higher or lower than £37 billion? The final bill. You remember that we're saving money. We're going to have loads of extra cash. 350 million quid a week, I think, was the figure. Higher or lower? I'm going to play the role of the late, great Bruce Forsyth. A Brexit-flavoured edition of Play Your Cards Right. Higher or lower? £37 billion, higher or lower? I'll tell you later in the programme. So, that is what it's going to cost. The MPs on the Public Accounts Committee accused her of spending eye-watering amounts of money with little effect on the course of the pandemic. So it's not just journalists who are to blame, according to Dido Harding. It is also presumably pesky politicians pointing out how much money she spent and how useless it was. £37 billion, I think, is the overall total for everything. So you look at the app system, you look at the system on the ground, it's a £13.5 billion system. Had completely failed to avoid the need for the lockdown last winter. She formally stepped down in May. She was hoping to end up as head of the NHS, but I'm told that Matt Hancock's Matt Hancock's voluntary departure, despite Boris Johnson's attempts to claim that he sacked him, has done for Lady Harding's hopes of assuming the reins of the entire NHS, and she is now claiming that it's being a great success. It has been a success. It's delivered on its objectives. Unbelievable. The chairman of the Science and Technology Committee, Greg Clark, pointed out that the Department of Health's formal business case presented to the Treasury last year to pitch for the unprecedented funding had stated literally on the record that the test and trace aimed to avoid the need for a second national lockdown. But suggesting that it was designed to avoid the need for a second national lockdown, as was written down in the original pitch, that was all down to media. Mischievous media. Because you can say what you like about the media in this country. They're absolutely diametrically, violently opposed to Boris Johnson and his government, aren't they? I mean, you can barely open the Daily Mail without reading some vitriolic attack upon the cabinet. The Telegraph is dripping daily with nasty, vicious, ad hominem abuse of senior politicians. Remember that time they caught Rishi Sunak drinking a mojito on a train? Honestly, I thought they'd never leave the poor man alone. And as for that occasion when Priti Patel was found to have bought a field for her disabled mother to keep donkeys in, I talk about pushing the boundaries of decency and basic responsibility. The way that the British media goes after this government is absolutely despicable. So I'm with Baroness Harding on this. Would you like to know a little bit more about her qualifications for doing the job in the first place? I think it's important to share because, of course, if she is going to have a crack at journalists, then the dwindling number of journalists in this country who still believe that the public deserve the facts. Oh, which reminds me, don't let me go home today without telling you what the Norwegian Prime Minister has to say about the Norwegian trade deal that Liz Truss is currently pretending is a great result for Britain. But the dwindling number of journalists in this country who still believe that you, whether you like us or not, you deserve the facts, would probably quite like to know just how Lady Harding ended up at the helm of the test and trace system. So we'll start in 1995 when she was a management consultant at McKinsey, and she landed a job at the age of 27 as marketing director of Thomas Cook, which is, a former huge travel agent. Thomas Cook spends a long time contemplating its navel. An executive from a rival firm tells Marketing Week. It is in character for it to recruit a consultant rather than a doer. So they hired a a doer, and she said it is common for consultants to be thought of as eggheads who don't know what they're doing. That's just outrageous. Eggheads who don't know what they're doing. I want to prove I can do things before the label sticks. 2 years later, interviewed by the Travel Trade Gazette, she made a virtue of her ignorance. I am not ashamed to say, after 2 years in the job, I do not know the travel industry as well as my colleagues, but in a team I think I bring a new perspective. Yeah. And when she was hired, she said that she would look at the future for the business in 5 to 10 years' time. Unfortunately, after 4 years, she was off, moving to Employment Services Group Manpower as, and I quote, Senior Vice President, Strategic Marketing Europe. I'm going to pause here to remind you of the final scenes of the last series of Line of Duty. If you saw them, you know. When she got there, Senior Vice President Marketing Europe, stayed there a year, then she changed horses again, became Commercial Director of the struggling retail group Woolworths. Do you remember Woolworths? I'm working with young colleagues at the moment. Do you remember? It used to be a very big chain of shops on the UK High Street. In 1999, Dido Harding became the Commercial Director of Woolworths. Just under a year later, she was off again. She joined Tesco as the Commercial Director for Value-Added Food. So I think Tesco becomes the first major company she's worked for that's still there. What a glittering CV this is. It's almost as amazing as Ian Duncan Smith's, although, of course, his was made up, as was discovered after the Conservative Party had elected him leader. As Tesco's International Support Director by 2004, she became responsible for overseas ventures and told The Guardian that she was planning to still be there in 5 years' time. Needless to say, 3 years later, she was off again. She went to Sainsbury's. A few months of gardening leave, March 2008, head of Sainsbury's convenience stores. 2 hours later, you think there'd be 2 hours later, 2 years later, she's off to TalkTalk. And this is where things get really interesting. She arrived at TalkTalk, the mobile provider, as chief executive in March of 2010. In 2011, TalkTalk incurred a £3 million fine from Ofcom for sending thousands of customers inaccurate bills. It then had to shell out another £2.5 million. Are you detecting a pattern here, perhaps? A £2.5 million refund cost, and during her time there, she twice won the Daily Mail's Wooden Spoon Award for providing the worst customer service in the UK. Precisely the sort of person a Prime Minister like David Cameron would look at and think, you're the kind of dude I could do business with. Have we got an important public-facing role for somebody who's twice been voted the Daily Mail's Wooden Spoon Award for providing the worst customer service in the UK? Nevertheless, it was indeed David Cameron who, in 2014, gave her a seat in the House of Lords as a Tory peer. A little later, you'll remember, cybercriminals got hold of the financial and personal details of about 150,000 TalkTalk customers, and when asked whether the data was encrypted or not, Chief Executive, now Baroness Harding, said, the awful truth is that I don't know. 100,000 customers leave TalkTalk, profits are halved. She then moves into what she calls public service activities, becoming chair of NHS Improvement, responsible for overseeing all NHS hospitals. She told the Health Select Committee, I have not worked in health and social care and would be the first to admit I have a lot to learn about the sector. She also rejected calls to resign the whip while holding what should be an independent post. And then along came COVID, which she contends she's done a bang-up job in dealing with, the Test and Trace app. I wasn't expecting to run through Dido Harding's CV, but I only just saw the little bit in the story that said the reason why everybody thinks the Test and Trace app has done so badly is because of those pesky journalists, despite, of course, the fact that the pitch for the Test and Trace app stated that it was designed to stop the need for a lockdown in the event of a second wave. So there it is. That is an astonishing illustration of falling upwards, isn't it? You sometimes wonder whether we get a bit carried away describing cronyism and the way in which people who can talk a good game but couldn't kick a ball in a million years somehow end up rising to the top in a country where, well, I don't know, Ian Duncan Smith ended up leader of the Conservative Party and Boris Johnson ended up Prime Minister. But that is an astonishing CV. My thanks to the geniuses at Private Eye magazine for doing the research there. And then, of course, we come to today. 0345 6060 973. Matt in E4 is already getting in touch. You're delusional, he says. Can't you spot a lucky, plucky winner when you see one? It's a good job I had my teeth in before I said that out loud. So, how's the app working out for you? Okay? We did this last week. Wasn't expecting the national news agenda to catch up with us quite so quickly. Took 24 hours for the story to appear on the front page of the Daily Mail. I said to you a week ago today, they won't do anything about it until they absolutely have to, until the pressure upon the population becomes so acute that Boris Johnson is put in that position, the only position in which he ever makes decisions, apart from the ones in the Kama Sutra, the only position in which he ever makes decisions is when he absolutely has to, when it becomes impossible to ignore. And we're not quite there yet. The only mystery today, for me, is whether or not the U-turn on the August 16th test and trace relationship will come before or after Germany overtakes us in the number of vaccines administered. Of course, according to some measures, they already have. But hey-ho, world-beating. How's the app working out for you? And just how bonkers has it now become? Some of the stories I'm hearing are unbelievable. Pinging to the left of me, pinging to the right of me. How many days of work? How's your workforce performing? What sort of a hole has been left on your shop floor or your office by the, I think, the oversensitivity of the app? And if you understand these matters, which means, unfortunately, Dido Harding can't ring in, if you've got the vaguest clue about how these systems work and how these matters unfold, when they talk about fixing the app, improving the app, making it less sensitive, how feasible is that? How would that actually work? And if Conservative MPs, as is reported, are now turning it off in order to avoid cancelling or postponing their summer holidays, can you make a strong case, and I hate doing this, because I'm very, very, very much a better safe than sorry, better late than never kind of guy, as you know. I'm no lucky plucky winner me. I'm quite a cautious character. But can you really look the rest of us in the eye and tell us why we shouldn't, why we should just leave it on, leave it pinging, and obey and observe its every pinging instruction? Whew. I didn't realise I was quite so bushy-tailed this morning until I got behind the microphone. The number you need is 0345 6060973. Play your cards right, and we'll talk after this. Julie in Sheffield goes to the top of the class, early doors this morning. James, she texts 284850. Any chance of Dido Harding becoming Italy's manager before Sunday? It's a thought, isn't it? But this app, 2 questions really. How much is it messing... Well, 3 questions, all right? 3 questions. In one. How much is it messing up your life? Your workplace, your livelihood, your business, your family, your children. 0345 6060973. In 2, how would you improve it? I mean, I like it when clever people who understand technology ring in. We can't do it every day because I'd advertise my stupidity far too explicitly. But why has it gone so badly? From a technological point of view, what is it about the way that it's been constructed and or implemented that has left it so unfit for purpose? 0345 6060973. And in 3, how can you make it better? Can you make it better? I'm reading in the Times about plans to make it 60% less sensitive. No, sorry, about plans to make it less sensitive after a 60% rise in contacts. Categorically and completely predicted on this programme 1 week ago today. But hey-ho, 21 after 10 is the time. Phone lines are open. Simon is in Hendon. Simon, what can you tell me?
Hello, James.
Hello, Simon.
Hi again, basically. Right, I talked, like, I just heard you talking about this app. This app is my nightmare at the minute. Like, I'm getting married in 10 days, and at workplace, 3 of my team members, they got pinged. And I haven't got pinged yet, touch wood.
Right.
And I'm just like, I don't know, my life is on pending at the minute. I don't know, am I going to get pinged in a minute? Like, is my wedding going to get cancelled again? So it's just like, I'm so confused. I don't know.
How many of the colleagues who've been pinged have actually either tested positive or displayed symptoms of coronavirus?
Basically, none.
Yeah.
Funny enough, we all work together. They tested negative. Oh, they're all fine. Literally they're all fine. They've been pinged. We all work on the same shift. And I'm like, how come, why have I not been pinged yet? And this is the confusing part. I'm like, well, if 3 of them getting pinged, they all work on the same shift. But one of them, I spend most of the time in the office doing the admin. Like, the office wasn't that big. Obviously, social distancing followed. But I'm like, that's the big question.
You don't ping if you've come into contact with someone who's pinged. You only ping if you've come into contact with someone who's tested positive.
Am I going to get it?
Yes, of course you are. And
it's the wedding. Like, my missus, like, she was like, this is the first time.
She's not your missus yet, Simon, mate. Hold your horses. No,
she's listening, mate. She's
your betrothed. She's your betrothed. She's your fiancée. She becomes your missus. Touch wood. Yeah. Pinging permitting. She becomes your missus in 10 days' time.
literally like 19. I'm like, that date needs to be happening. And we are on a panic alarm. Like, literally, like, okay, we don't have a dance floor. All right, we don't have a dance floor, but we can have a groom.
Sure.
You know, sorry. Tell the guests.
It is a bit of a prerequisite for a successful wedding, is that you have two people there intending to actually plight their troth. Are you tempted to turn it off? And I wouldn't have asked you this a week ago. I was still, I'm afraid, being responsible. But I read in the Times today, one Tory MP, when asked whether they were aware of colleagues who were turning off or disabling the tracing function, replied, "Don't ask, don't tell." Now, bearing in mind, of course, Simon, and I know you understand this, just because Conservative MPs are doing it doesn't mean you should, because it is one rule for them and another rule for the rest of us, as Boris Johnson demonstrated yesterday by not wearing a mask in the back of his prime ministerial car, even though his bodyguards and driver were wearing a mask. But are you tempted to turn it off, to disable it?
No comment.
Don't ask, don't tell. Simon, I hope you have a very, very, very happy day in 10 days' time. 10:24 is the time. So how hard is it hitting you? I do want a voice of responsibility. It's normally me that provides the voice of responsibility. This is how desperate things are. Even I'm feeling a little bit irresponsible today. Can you explain to the Tory MPs who are currently turning it off, disabling the tracing function, could you just tell them why they shouldn't? Let's focus on them, okay? 0345 606 0973. And technologically speaking, do you know why it's gone so badly? Or, of course, if you're Dido Harding so successfully, and how feasible, plausible, or possible is it to improve it by making it, and I quote, less sensitive? The sensitivity of the NHS COVID-19 tracing app is to be reduced after the number of people pinged rose more than 60% in a week. Oh, a week. What was it that happened on this programme exactly a week ago? I should probably stop mentioning it now. Paul's in Bristol. Paul, what's going on?
Hi, James. How are you?
Very well, Paul. A little bit cross, but, you know, I'm getting used to it now. I'm learning to live with my anger. How are you, more importantly?
I'm probably a little bit more cross than you, purely because I've just at a point now where I'm an employer, and, the last 10 days, all of a sudden, has just gone absolutely crazy. I've got staff off left, right and centre getting pinged. No one's had COVID. We have 40 people work in our workplace. Since the 1st of March last year, we have done everything we can to keep them safe. We haven't had a single case of COVID in the workplace. And Boris tells everybody it's safe to go and get this disease now because it's not really killing that many people. You can go to Wembley. But by the way, if you do come into contact with someone with this relatively safe disease, you've got to have 10 days off work. And I've got to tell my staff at the moment that they're not going to get paid. We've looked into it. Apparently, we can only pay them statutory sick pay, and we can't furlough them if they've been pinged. I don't know if that's correct or not.
Well, so someone will know. Someone listening will know, but I suspect it's true. I don't know what else they would be entitled to. There was calls from Labour for a £500 payment for people who were particularly badly hit. I think they were low earners originally. So if there's any fine detail to share, we'll do it. But you sound to me like you're well across the fact, and also that you can't quite believe what's going on.
No, I'm at the point where I'm actually asking my HR company now whether it's legal or right of me to request that people either don't bring their phones to work or whether they uninstall the app, which is something I did back in November because I just don't, if you're sensible and you can adhere to the recommendation and you've got a clean record like we have as an employer, I think, the app's just about to become a massive pain. I've just met a friend of mine who runs a number of restaurants and half of his restaurants are closed purely because he hasn't got any staff because they're all getting pinged. Obviously, working in a restaurant is, prime.
It's kind of hard to observe social distancing. What would... I can't approve of you deleting it in November, obviously, because that was before the vaccines. But on the other hand, you could come back at me and say it was before the Johnson variant as well, couldn't you? Which appears to be because I was about to ask. Yeah, go on. Of course. My
reasoning for the November thing was I employ 40 people, and I would have really struggled to keep their employment safe, over lockdown 2. Or lockdown 3, even if I was told to isolate, and I've got kids in school.
I hear you. I do hear you, and I hadn't thought of that. I shall be honest with you, because you are making a
mask, I wash
calculation.
My hands, I keep the windows open. I do everything I can to keep it absolutely.
But if
safe
you're not there, the business.
Clean sheet.
If you're not there, the business doesn't really function properly.
Absolutely, and 40 people's employment is at risk.
So, other question I was going to ask, but I think we've sort of stumbled across the answer together, is why has it suddenly gone so nuts, given that we've been using the app or carrying the app for most of last year, almost to the end of the year in your case? And I guess the answer is the Johnson variant. Is it because it is so infectious?
Boris said last week, hey, everybody, this isn't a problem anymore, go and get the disease. But the one key thing he didn't do was remove the requirement of this app. You know, why are we allowed to take masks off? Masks have got to be about the easiest thing to keep in place for another few months to keep everybody as safe as they can be. But he said, go to Wembley, take your masks off. Oh, but by the way, 10 days off if your app pings.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? It's I mean, I hesitate to use the phrase because even I'm bored of it with it now, but it's clarity and leadership. It's doing one thing with your left hand and not paying the vaguest bit of attention to what your right hand is still doing, because you can make a case in isolation for all of the policy decisions. It might be a bad case, but you can at least make a case. What you can't do, and what you've just highlighted perfectly, Paul, what you can't do is make a case for the relaxation while you've still got this app in place, because either you're safe or you're not safe. And if you've not got it and you've been told to isolate for 10 days, then businessmen like you are on the back of 15 months of hell are being served an almost unbelievable package of problems. So I don't know what the answer is to your question to your HR department of what you are and are not allowed to do, but I do know that the Times is reporting that one Tory MP, when asked whether they were aware of colleagues turning off the tracing function, replied, "Don't ask, don't tell," with the constant caveat, Paul, and I know you understand this, that just because Tory MPs are doing it doesn't mean you should, because it is, as ever, one rule for them and another rule for everybody else. Shall I add my little line? It sounds quite well rehearsed, this. You should know by now I don't rehearse anything. As Boris Johnson demonstrated yesterday by failing to wear a mask in the back of a car where his security and driver were both wearing masks. 10:30 is the time. Good luck, Paul. A lot of you are wondering whether we will be observing a minute's silence today for the Conservative MP for Ashfield, Lee Anderson, who continues to boycott the Euro tournament because he really hates the anti-racism protest that the players undertake before each game. He has given an interview for LBC, and if hell freezes over, I might play it out on the programme. So do stand by for that. Speaking of things that are coming up a little bit later on the programme, we'll be speaking to the England legend who was on the panel that selected Gary Southgate. Something for the Chelsea fans as well to look forward to. Graham Lasso will be joining us. Just, I thought, right at the end of the show, as we throw forward to the weekend, you probably didn't realise that. It wasn't like a huge story at the time, but Graham, who of course played for England with Gareth Southgate, was on the 5-man panel at the FA that took the decision as to whether or not to give the then caretaker manager, Gareth Southgate, the big job. So I thought it'd be really interesting to find out why or what it was they saw a little bit ahead of the rest of us. 10:35 is the time. I'd love to ask Matt Hancock what it was he saw in Baroness Harding that prompted him to put her in charge of the test and trace system. Similarly, I'd love to ask David Cameron what it was that he saw in Dido Harding that prompted him to put her in the House of Lords. And what job did he give her? I don't know, actually. And I mean, Matt Hancock, you'd think, could give us a buzz, wouldn't you? He's not got a lot else going on at the moment. I suppose he's probably redecorating or something like that. But he could just presumably call in a favour from Carrie Simmons's mate, and then get a dodgy deal done on the funding for the redecoration. So you'd presume that Hancock would have time to speak to the British public about why he put this woman in charge of test and trace after a career history that is, well, probably the highlight of which would be winning 2 Wooden Spoon Awards from the Daily Mail for worst customer service, and not knowing whether or not the personal details of more than 150,000 of her own customers at TalkTalk were actually encrypted after it emerged that the system had been hacked. I mean, that's what you do, isn't it? Presumably, if you know the right people. You know the right people, you wear the right tie, got the right handshake. I don't know how this works. I'd love a piece of the action. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm a fairly moral guy. If someone said to me, "You're completely useless, here's an amazing job," yeah, all right. No one has actually said that to me yet, although I probably was over-promoted as show business editor at the Daily Express. This job is a daily test. You can't really do this for very long if you haven't at least got a vague grasp of what's needed. But if someone came along to you and said, "Look, here's $250,000 a year and a seat in the House of Lords. Fancy a big job?" And you sort of think, "I'm supremely unqualified for this job, but crikey, seat in the House of Lords, think what my mum would say." Lord O'Brien of Kidderminster. So if you're listening, Matt, I know you're not busy. Give us a buzz. Tell us what it was you saw. And do you agree with her that everything's going swimmingly, despite the fact that the stated pitch said it's designed to stop the need for a lockdown in the event of a second wave, and we're now looking at our third wave, while many people feel that the decision to loosen the lockdown may prove to be premature. But as I said to you at the beginning of the week, and I'll repeat it to you at the end of the week, you have to hope this works. Even though it's your house he's gambling on a pair of nines, you have to hope. Even if he's bluffing, you have to hope he wins, because it's your house that he's just pushed into the middle of the table. 10:38 is the time. Back to the app. Matthew is in High Wycombe. Matthew, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello.
Just want to say, first of all, love the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for doing it.
Thank you very much. You're very welcome. I do get paid. It's not an act of charity, but I'm very grateful for the compliments. Carry on.
No, still. But yeah, so just wanted to explain the situation that I had. So I went out 2 days ago with a friend. He wanted to watch the football, but beer was involved.
Yeah.
So all good. So we went to the second pub of the night. The first pub we just filled in the paper just because it was on the table. And got to the second pub, I went to use the app, and it said I had 2 days left to isolate.
They'd only just told you that, or you hadn't noticed that, or?
Well, after scrolling through my phone, I had about 30 notifications, just generic apps and things like that, and I just hadn't cleared it recently.
Fair enough.
So I clicked on it. I was like, what the hell do I do?
Yeah, you're already out and about.
Yeah, and I've been out and about recently. I had no symptoms. I've had my first jab, and just said, well, can't do anything about it now, so just carried on.
Is it completely useless, do you think? I mean, it must serve some sort of purpose. If I had come into contact... The problem is this, right? This is why the word sensitive is so important today, and anybody who understands the technology or the science can perhaps give us a buzz and talk us through some of the facts. Because I would still, despite being double jabbed and having had a bout of coronavirus myself, and I am still being very, very careful. I've started hand sanitizing on an industrial scale again after tailing off a little bit over the months. But I would still really, really want to know if I'd been in very close proximity to somebody who had tested positive. But there's no earthly way that however many people it is who've been pinged in the last few days fit into that category. We still get stories. We should have paid more attention at the outset, Matthew, when people were explaining to us that the Bluetooth requirements meant that you could actually get pinged if you just lived upstairs from somebody, or if you lived on the other side of a thick concrete wall. And the details on the app, the actual advice you're given about the circumstances in which you can turn it off, have been, I mean, incredibly absent from the conversation. If your phone is in a locker or a communal area, you're supposed to turn it off. How many people knew that? So presumably, obviously, if you leave it on your desk and you go for a sandwich, you should turn it off for that period as well. If you're working behind a fixed transparent screen and are fully protected from other people, I'm in a fixed transparent room and I'm fully protected from other people, but mine's on at the moment. If you're a worker in health and social care wearing a medical grade PPE, such as a surgical mask, you can turn it off. If you're a healthcare worker working in a healthcare building, such as, all right, that doesn't apply to everybody. You can set a reminder in the app to tell you to turn contact tracing back on. How many people, Matthew, do you think have been turning it on and off according to the specific circumstances in which they find themselves?
Probably about 10%.
I think that's very generous. So what did you do, if you don't mind me asking? You don't have to tell me. You could take the approach of this Conservative MP and just say, don't ask, don't tell, James.
I would say the same.
Don't ask, don't tell, James. 10:41 is the time. Does anyone want to have a crack at what I think is probably still quite an important contribution to the programme? Tell the rest of us, tell Matthew, tell the Tory MPs, tell everybody why they shouldn't do what they are feeling increasingly tempted to do. And why has it all gone so badly? Or, of course, if you're Dido Harding, so successfully. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. 10:41 is the time. I've got some phone lines free. Let me clarify what the questions are. I don't want to sound ungrateful, but you're not going to get on today if you're talking about test results or about attendant issues. There are days and there will be days where we cast our net very wide, but there's three quite specific inquiries here today. The first is, how badly or how brilliantly is it affecting your life and or livelihood or family? Okay, 034560 60973. The second is, do we know why it is going so badly? And I think that's a fair comment to make. Do we know why, despite Dido Harding's mumblings at Select Committee yesterday, why is it causing so many problems? What has gone wrong? 03456060973, and you might need some science to answer that question. And how feasible is it to fix it, which is probably going to be a question you can only answer if you've got the qualifications to answer the second one as well. In the spirit of me teasing you with promises to reveal information a little later in the programme and then going home having completely forgotten, I haven't yet forgotten today's Play Your Cards Right question, which is, the estimated total cost of test and trace is £37 billion. It was confirmed yesterday what the total bill will be that the United Kingdom has to pay the European Union as a consequence of that brilliant oven-ready deal and withdrawal agreement that Boris Johnson signed, having said that the EU can go whistle. You remember when he said they can go whistle for any money at all? So do you think that the total bill will be higher or lower than the £37 billion for the useless test and trace? Higher or lower, the bill that we'll be paying to the European Union? I shall reveal that to you at some point in the programme if I remember. Jordan's in Sheffield. Jordan, what can you tell us?
Hi, James.
Hello, Jordan.
I'm currently self-isolating, having been pinged, and I've missed 5 days of work currently, which at the height of the lockdowns, like last year, was paid. Yes. But now, obviously, we're getting towards the end of it. People are vaccinated. It's now a sort of discretionary thing. So I will actually find out when I go back into work, effectively, if I've been paid or not for those amount of days, which is 10 days is 10 days, no matter what job you're doing.
I think your employer is, and Paul earlier touched on this, who speaks from the position of being a boss. I think, as in he's an employer, that's not a sort of figure of speech to describe a top lad, although he did seem like a top lad as well. But speaking as a boss, he seemed to think that the requirement was just statutory sick pay. So the rest of it will be at your boss's discretion, won't it?
Yes, yeah, well, and...
Do you get it? I mean, is there a case? You know me, I'm a big fan of silver linings. Can we see anything here that is a charitable reading of the current chaos?
I mean, unless you like days off work. Apart from that, I can't see anything.
Unpaid days off work.
Unless you like unpaid days off work, I genuinely cannot see any issue. I mean, I would like to have a crack at attempting to answer one of your questions.
Yeah, feel free.
How to sort of fix the issue. And I think the problem lies is the system in of itself, like the actual internal network, probably isn't the worst. It's the input. So people testing. Not enough people are testing themselves, I would say, to have enough data going into the system. And then on the other side of that, on the back end, you've got not enough contact tracers or not enough people contacting the people, which I've heard a lot of people on the show saying, like you had a lot of contact tracers calling in and saying, we've just been sat around doing nothing. So obviously I would say it's either an input of data, and I would say it's people trying to get in contact with the input of data that would be the main issue. Personally, Bluetooth, like the actual, I know that the technology itself is based on Apple, and I think for Apple it's the exposure notification system put in by Apple, and the same situation for Google on Android phones.
Is this your field?
It's not my field. No, it's not my field, and I do have a biology degree, so I'm versed enough in a pandemic.
Have you ever been a management consultant who's worked at several companies that have subsequently gone under?
Can't say that.
Well, you're never going to be put in charge. You're never going to be. Well, you're still young. You're still young, Jordan. Okay, so I can see some sense. I understand most of what you've said. So that wouldn't necessarily be something that could be fixed now, though, would it? Or would it?
Oh, no.
Too late.
No.
This is what should have been done at the beginning. 2020 hindsight.
Yeah.
Oh, happy days. Have you got a second? I just want to run something by you. There's an amazing book that's just come out by a woman called Lucy Kellaway, who I interviewed yesterday, and she jacked in a really high-powered job as a columnist on the Financial Times to become a teacher. She's on a real mission. It's a beautiful interview. It's going to be on full disclosure shortly. But in this book about moving from being a Financial Times columnist to being a teacher in some quite tough schools. One of the pieces of advice that I remember she was given in this book was that kids called Jordan are always trouble. I wonder if you'd like to respond to that.
Well, I shall just tell you, James, that at age 14, I was probably one meeting away from being expelled from school.
There you go.
So,
if you'd been called James, then using me as an example, you'd have been expelled from school. Jordan, thank you very much indeed. We return to the vexed question of what the hell has gone wrong with this app. Why has it gone so wrong, and how wrong has it gone for you? Sarah is in Sevenoaks. Sarah, take your pick and answer whichever one or all or none of the questions that you please.
Okay. Hi, James.
Hello, Sarah.
The app is rubbish.
You're not winning any prizes for that.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
Dido Harding probably would, but you crack on.
Okay, so I was all for the app. I as soon as it was available, I put it on my phone. I think it was before Christmas or just after New Year. I got a text message saying that somebody called Jamie,
Yes.
so obviously not me, had tested positive for COVID and he needed to self-isolate for however many days it was.
Why were they telling you that?
Obviously, there was a mix-up in the phone numbers, I'm guessing.
Right.
I don't actually know. So on the app...
Well, someone
the
called Jamie
countdown-
put your phone number down. No, that wouldn't make sense because he's all... Well, I just give up. I just don't know.
Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows?
It could be an admin error. And anyway, so obviously the countdown went on my app. I kept getting daily text messages. You have so many days, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I rang 119?
Yeah.
And I said, this is happening. Please can the error be sorted out? And they said, yeah, we're going to send it to the right department and we'll clear that straight away. Next day, I was still getting text messages. I deleted the app, turned the app back on, still the same countdown. So I've given up on it, which is a shame.
Well, I think you have a more compelling case for giving up on it than the Tory MPs who are reportedly giving up on it so that they can go on holiday, because it was clearly in error.
Yeah,
and yet making demands of you that you couldn't realistically be expected to keep.
Mm-hmm. But I want to use it because even though I'm double jabbed, I know I could still get COVID. I've got elderly parents.
Yes.
I have friends and families who are considered vulnerable. I want to use it, but I can't.
Well, this is utilitarianism in action, isn't it? Because I completely understand your sentiments. They're probably closest to mine, actually. And the problem becomes, as a population-wide issue, the trade-off between good and bad, doesn't it? Between, positives and negatives. So if hundreds of thousands of people who don't need to be self-isolating are self-isolating, is the bad, that's on one side of the scales. Mm-hmm. And then if we start switching it off, people who should be self-isolating will not be self-isolating is the bad on the other side of the scales. The problem with the numbers, of course, is that it's easy to see one side as being much, much, much heavier than the other.
Mm-hmm. And who was Jamie spreading it to?
Who was Jamie? Well, you know that musical, don't you? Everybody's talking about Jamie. I must go and see that, actually. It's one of the things I'm really looking forward to doing. Sarah, thank you. Another sort of insight, if you like. Still hanging on for the explanation, the straight-faced, honest explanation of why people, maybe not Sarah, because she obviously fell down some anomalous rabbit hole on the technology, but the rest of us, why should we leave it on and leave it functioning? Because I suggested to you that most people wouldn't be across the circumstances in which they're supposed to turn it off, because clarity and leadership. Instead of standing up wanging on about our world-beating vaccine rate, we were, I think, overtaken by Germany in the last few hours, by the way, on the total number of vaccines administered. You won't hear Boris Johnson mention that. But instead of wanging on about that all the time, he should have been really, really, really hitting home with the circumstances in which you can turn it off, which include when it's in lockers, which makes this message from a pal of mine about a school where his child goes. The headmaster has said all the teachers left their phones in a locker during the day, in the same locker, but they didn't turn off the app, so every single phone got pinged. How are you going to cope with a problem like that? I think we'll have quite soft borders on the programme today. We will have freedom of movement of topics, I think, given that the broad umbrella of coronavirus shelters all of the conversations I'm keen to have. So, still keen to get to I want to talk about the app. I think the app is the big story. I know it's a bit silly of me to keep pointing out that we told you it would be, or you told me it would be, actually, to be fair. It was the callers more than anything else. What did we said, didn't we? What was the phrase? Anecdata. I think that the first time I said that out loud was on last Friday's show, and there was just so many people calling in to tell us how badly the app was performing and how disruptive it was being, that you kind of knew that this was going to be the next big story. We did the same thing with schools. He called me, because it was happening in my life and my friends' and family's life, so we opened a show one morning about a month ago saying, schools are going a bit nuts, aren't they? Well, it can't just be me. It can't just be my corner of West London. Schools are going a bit bonkers, and boom, the phones rang off the hook. A couple of weeks later, it's national news. The first time we did it, I think, during coronavirus was, oddly, given what we're talking about today, was with Test and Trace. But the human, rather than the app-based element of it, the people that were being paid to, we discovered, sit at home and do absolutely naff all. I mean, incredible, really. And the queue of callers ringing in to just say to us, well, I've been on the payroll for a month now and I've made one phone call. I just have to agitate my mouse every 20 minutes so that if anyone is supervising my screen, they'll know that I'm still awake. I mean, incredible. I didn't quite believe it at the time. And then, lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, or it may have taken a little bit longer in that case, it's national news. So I suppose we should be grateful that it's only taken a week for all of your testimony about the massive problems with the pinging app to become, well, it took a day for it to become national news. It's taken about a week for Noises Off to start suggesting that the government is poised to do something, which is the question that we haven't had a proper answer to yet. Jordan's best efforts notwithstanding, is it possible to, quote, tweak it, end quote, in a way that would solve a lot of the problems that we're having? I would urge you, personally, to leave it on, but be a lot more conscientious about the circumstances in which you are supposed to turn it off. So, for example, it's easy to forget it's not you that's coming into proximity with people who've tested positive, subsequently tested positive. It's your phone. So, if you've got a really old phone, you're not even part of this equation. You're not even part of this problem, for want of a better word. So if you leave your phone in a locker or in a desk drawer while you're elsewhere, you should turn off the app for the duration of that period of time. If you are working behind, I didn't know this, and I do this for a living, if you're working behind a fixed transparent screen and are fully protected from other people, you should turn it off. And then there are more specific circumstances. Thanks to Sebastian for sending this in. It's all there. It's all on the app. There are more specific circumstances for health and social care workers regarding where they are and what PPE they're wearing. So how feasible is it to fix it? Because, again, you're in that position where even though they are a clown car, they are a barrage of balloons, they are also in charge, even after presiding over epic economic and human tragedy. They're the people in charge. So you need them. You need to want them to succeed. Otherwise, Horatio, I shall go mad. So what would success look like in these circumstances? What would a tweak look like? So that's going to stay running. This is freedom of movement of topics. We're not drawing a line under the 10 o'clock topic and moving on to a new one at 11 o'clock. And then I want to talk about holidays. I want to talk about working from home. Rishi Sunak's had a little bit of a flirtation with the suggestion that everyone should go back to the office on July the 19th. I don't think I've got much to say about vaccinations at the moment, except that we're now fifth on the most new cases in the world. Fifth, which makes it still very hard for me to understand, especially given that our vaccination head start has been nibbled away now to the point where Germany has overtaken us on total doses, not on... according to some measures, according to the one I've been consulting, which would have been from yesterday, I suppose, because it's in today's Times, UK's on 79.8 million doses administered in total, while Germany is on 79.7. So I told you that was going to happen by the end of next week. I owe you an apology. I think it's going to happen, if it hasn't already, by the end of this week. So that vaccine argument, we don't need to worry about reopening because of our massive vaccine success, may yet turn out to be true. And again, you have to hope that it does. But our massive vaccine success has now been emulated by many comparable countries who remain very wary about loosening lockdown. And everybody now is shouting Israel at the radio because Israel is a country who have been matching us jab for jab on the vaccination status, but when the Johnson variant started sweeping through Tel Aviv and elsewhere, they decided to reintroduce restrictions regarding masks and social distancing and other things. So Israel, matching us jab for jab, going in precisely the opposite direction with regard to masks and other safety measures. Israel have got nothing to lose. If we turn out not to have made a terrible mistake, it's not going to harm Israel. So, there's no, I don't think, difficulty in saying I hope Israel didn't need to do that, because we haven't done it. And I really, really hope we didn't need to either. The front page of The Guardian yesterday or the day before is kind of haunting, because you've got a picture of the football, so it'd be yesterday, like front and centre. And then across the bottom of the story, you've got a tale of 100 scientists who are deeply concerned about what they've done now. And here's a little game to play. I've got 2 games up and running now. I'll give you the play your cards right answer after the 1/4 break. I'll come back from the 1/4 break. Has the final bill that the United Kingdom has to pay to the European Union, has it come in at higher or lower than the £37 billion we've spaffed up the wall on our test and trace system? I'll give you the answer to that shortly. But here's another little quiz for you, if you like quizzes. We mentioned Ian Duncan Smith earlier in the programme. We mentioned that his CV was largely embellished and or invented, only discovered after he became leader of the Conservative Party, and that embarrassment and the humiliation of being the only leader since Chamberlain that they decided not to let fight a general election hasn't stopped him either getting knighted or becoming what used to be called a Tory grandee, and waxing lyrical about his deep understanding of lockdowns and coronaviruses after his deep understanding of the withdrawal agreement led him to stand up in the House of Commons and say that we didn't need to read it because we knew exactly what was in it, and then 6 months later say we have to disown it because what's in it is awful. Yeah, that Ian Duncan Smith. I'll give you some dates, okay? So he has said we need to come out, there's a headline article in the Daily Telegraph, we need to come out of lockdown and trust British common sense. We need to come out of lockdown and trust British common sense. I'll get you the exactly accurate headline in just a moment, but the game can get up and running already. Okay, here it is. It's time to unlock the lockdown and trust the common sense of the British people. Woohoo! Did Ian Duncan Smith write that article on the 4th of July 2021? The 4th of May 2021? The 4th of July 2020? Or the 4th of May 2020? So Ian Duncan Smith wrote an article for the Daily Telegraph comic which was headlined, "It's time to unlock the lockdown and trust the common sense of the British people." Did he write that article on the 4th of July 2021, the 4th of May 2021, the 4th of July 2020, and the 4th of May 2020? And I suppose the correct answer to that question should determine whether or not Ian Duncan Smith should still be spouting forth in the public space or not. But of course, this being Britain, a place where Andrew Bridgen, who believes that being English entitles him to an Irish passport, is still booked by broadcasters left, right and centre to spout nonsense on, I think it was indigenous people this week. I think he's married to a Serbian woman, but hey-ho, consistency was never his strong suit. It's highly unlikely that Ian Duncan Smith will ever observe a period of silence. So the apps, and then perhaps a bit of holidays and a bit of working from home. But bear with. Mike's in Durham. Mike, what's going on?
Good morning, James.
Hello, Mike.
I feel like I'm coming to a bit of the confessional box here, and I do feel...
well, I am Catholic.
Well, I'm non-religious, so that's the comical thing. And I feel like I really feel guilty because I'm very pro-vaccine rollout.
Yes.
I volunteered at some of the original hubs and downloaded the Responder app, and that was great success. I have deleted the app because I've lost all confidence and integrity that I think it was designed to do.
Yeah.
Because selfishly, I'm at the Grand Prix next weekend.
Where is it next weekend?
British Grand Prix.
Oh, it's the British one. Okay. So, yeah, fair play. So it's more of the... Is that not one of the events that is... Yeah, well, obviously it's one of the test events, but you don't want to get pinged before it starts.
If I get pinged, that's curtains for me. And I have to say, all I see over social media is restaurants closed, bars closed because someone's been contacted, and I just don't trust it. I just, I'm not, I'm I do lateral flows at home, and I've done,
Yeah,
I couldn't be I'm the absolute opposite of an anti-vaxxer.
But this, no, that's a nice way of putting it. I understand exactly what you mean. In other words, you value knowledge, science, and life, and health
over something,
the opposite.
Technology made by someone who doesn't even know whether she sent or lost an email or not.
Yeah, well, good point. And I don't know what to say to you, because you're in many ways, as you know, you're the nucleus of the entire conversation that we've been having today, with the added element of you being very, very careful and very conscientious, because lots of people who are neither of those things, deleting the app would be a problem in a way that your decision is not a problem. So you will be confident that you haven't got it. If you did a positive lateral flow test on Thursday, you wouldn't go to the Grand Prix, I sense.
No, 100%. It's a technology, I don't believe it. And I have to say, if they tweak the technology, I don't even know whether that would then stretch me to reinstall it, because it's almost like believing the missus once she's had an affair. Do you really want to stay with her? Would you trust her again?
So what they've done, incredibly, although not that incredibly when you actually scrutinise her CV, what this system has done is lose the faith of people like you, and to a lesser extent at this point in proceedings, possibly because I'm not going to the Grand Prix. Although if anyone's got a ticket for Sunday, I could probably join Mike in the decision-making process that he's just described. They've actually managed to lose the faith of conscientious people like you. That's incredible when you think about it, because I don't think anybody listening is going to have a particular problem with what you've just said.
Yeah, and I'm guilty about saying.
I know you are, but that's the reason why you're a good man, isn't it? Why that's why you do what you do, not to protect you necessarily. It's like mask wearing isn't about protecting ourselves anymore. If we're jabbed, etc., it's about protecting everybody else. Oh, I don't know what to say. Except that I absolve you of your sins. Go in the peace of Christ.
Fantastic. I'll see you at the Grand Prix.
And 37 billion quid on a test and trace system that most of us, and if you want to ring in and praise it to the rafters, especially Matt Hancock or Dido Harding, the number remains 03456060973. But we come close to unanimity occasionally on the programme, and we're pretty close to it here. It is not a great success. In fact, it is arguably an absolute pinging disaster. But that cost 37 billion quid. Well, I mean, I think the estimate is that that's what it will cost in total. You can say 13 billion in terms of the app specifically, and what's been spent already. But let's take the overall figure of 37 billion, because it's bigger. And the question I've been asking you since 10 o'clock this morning, in the spirit of the late, great Bruce Forsyth, is, do you think the sum we are liable to pay to the EU as part of the post-Brexit financial settlement is higher or lower than £37 billion? Higher or lower? Come on, everybody play. Everybody play. Higher or lower? Yeah, you're right, it's higher. It's £47.5 billion. This is the withdrawal agreement. This is the deal that they signed. This is the deal that Boris Johnson signed after telling you that the EU, if it was expecting any money out of the United Kingdom, the EU could go whistle for it. But I'm certainly not going to go down the road of becoming a condescending, sneering member of the metropolitan elite. I know that when Boris Johnson said that the EU could go whistle for any money, I know that when you voted, you knew we were going to pay them £47.5 billion. It would be pathetic and unkind of me to suggest otherwise. You knew perfectly well that there was going to be a border in the Irish Sea shortly after Boris Johnson swore blind that there wouldn't be, and you also knew perfectly well that we were going to be in a hole for £47.5 billion over several years, like a mortgage. £47.5 billion payment to the EU, despite Boris Johnson telling you the EU could go whistle for it. And it would be incredibly patronising and condescending to suggest that you didn't realise that you were being lied to. 21 minutes after 11. And then, of course, what did he go on to do next? After selling you the Brexit that bears no resemblance whatsoever to what he told you it would look like, he took responsibility for the coronavirus pandemic response. And who did they hire to provide arguably the most important part of infrastructure? Dido Harding. And how's it going? Well, you tell me. On 03456060973. Why is it so poor? Technological answers. And is it fixable? Also technological answers. And then, you've put me in a bit of a box this morning, you pesky people. I can't go bi-topical. I can't have freedom of movement of topics between 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock, because every topic we do at the moment, the switchboard fills up. So I can't simultaneously have half a switchboard looking at the app-based question and the other half looking at what you're going to do regarding the holiday-based scenario. And another thing they didn't appear to have worked out before it happened, you can't fly here from other countries if you've been double vaccinated, because the method of checking whether or not your certification is kosher doesn't currently exist. That's my understanding of the situation. It's possible they're just being mean. So 22 minutes after 11, I'll wrestle with that burden myself. How do you introduce new subjects when your switchboard is still full of people wanting to contribute to the old subject? Do you know, when I started on LBC, it was an hour and 15 minutes before anybody rang me. So I probably shouldn't complain about having too many people ringing. Be careful what you wish for, James. Tony's in Taunton. Tony, what can you tell me?
Good morning, James. Good to speak to you again.
Likewise.
We have talked before. I have a Master of Science degree in computing.
Yeah, but were you in charge of Talk when it got 150,000?
No.
Okay, well, just bear that in mind, mate, before you start coming over all Billy Big Bananas, all right?
And on top of that, I've worked on a number of major projects, including the development of apps. The last one I was with was out in the Middle East.
Yeah, but were you high up at Woolworths shortly before it went out of business forever?
I actually used to buy Pick and Mix from Woolworths.
Yeah, me too.
And when I was about 16, one of my girlfriends actually worked there, and I used to go along and try and see if she'd
fill your pockets. You used to fill your pockets, Tony. I've done my one absolution of sins for the day. I'm afraid I can't be dishing them out like confetti. That would be very.
Right. I never got any extras. Don't worry.
Glad to hear it. What about the Pick and Mix? Carry on.
But the kind of work I did when I was in the Middle East, we were developing an app for use by the public.
Right.
And it would be the kind of thing where they could say they wanted to go from point A to point B, and it would give them the best route. If they wanted to find where the nearest bus stop was, it would take them to there. When they're at the bus stop, it would tell them when the next bus was. So it was fairly comprehensive. We were hoping for about 250,000 people to use it. So I've got some experience in that area.
Yes.
The key problem we had right at the very beginning was that what we call the master data was incorrect. Now, in simple terms, what that means is, for example, the bus stops, the information about where they were was incorrect, sometimes by up to half a kilometre.
Right.
So it would direct you to a particular point and the bus stop wouldn't be there. Because the information on that bus stop was incorrect. With most of these kinds of systems, what we call the master data, if that is not correct from the very, very beginning, you will then get a multiplication of errors further on down the line.
Of course you would. Even I can understand that. But do we know whether the master data, I have to be slightly careful how you say that out loud, otherwise people might think we're talking about Boris Johnson. Do we know for sure that the master data in this context is wrong?
We do.
Right.
And I've got a personal experience because my partner lives in a ground floor flat.
Yes.
And the system can't detect that there are actually two residences on that location.
Right.
So the person in the flat above who has tested positive causes her app to ping because she's come into contact with him because she's in the same residence. Well, in fact, she's not. She's 10 feet below him in a completely different residence.
And that means that God knows what percentage of people being pinged have come nowhere near the person that they are being pinged for coming near to. But this, I mean, I don't want to rain on your chips, but people did tell us about this. I mean, no, actually, I just presumed. So you presume if it's popping up on a little old radio show like this, that it would be dealt with. I mean, it'd be over a year when people were ringing in to tell me that this would be a problem that hadn't accommodated the existence, for example, of walls.
I hate to say it, but this is actually quite a common problem.
Yeah.
Another company I worked at, we had a major issue because the people in the sales department couldn't understand that part of the process required the information to be absolutely spot on correct. So instead of putting in GB for Great Britain, they put in UK. And as it goes down through the database, it doesn't recognise UK. So it ignores it.
Right.
And it took us probably about 3 to 4 months before we could actually get them to correct that problem. And that's just one simple issue. This is the big problem. When you have these kind of systems, there's two parts. There's the technological part, and then there's the human part.
Yes, of course.
And a lot of it is down to how people are trained to use the system. If they're not trained correctly, they won't use it correctly. They'll find their own way of doing it, which is probably wrong, not the way that it was designed to be used. They'll try and find ways around certain things, which then cause other issues within the system. And it just carries on. It just snowballs.
So,
the other part...
Go on.
Oh, sorry, go on.
No, well, no, you go on. I think people would rather listen to you than me, Tony, on this occasion.
All right. The other issue is how you extract data from the system. Now, I'm going to try and do this without being too technical.
Thank you.
When you have a database, imagine it is a series of index cards.
Yeah.
So you're going to search for a particular piece of information on all those index cards. And it might be the name, or it might be the date of birth, or it might be, I don't know, address, or things like this. This is what we refer to as the master data. The other data is that which comes in. So, for example, has this person been tested? Has this person had this vaccination? This kind of stuff. So it's going to be able to search through, and you can search for everybody named Smith that lives in part of London that has had the vaccination. And it will do that. Yeah. And what it produces is what we call a report. Now, that's pretty straightforward, but sometimes reports become incredibly complex.
Sure.
And if the report is not correctly designed, what it produces is garbage. Give an example. This goes back a long time ago.
Yeah.
When I was working for a company that produced stuff for people within the building trade.
Right.
And I won't name them, but the people I was doing this work for actually are one of the biggest suppliers of replacement doors and windows. And I was doing this purely off my own back.
Okay.
So I had a couple of days spare. And I created a report which detected who the person was that was logged into the system. And it then changed the report to produce the information that person would need. So if it was a salesperson, it would show him what he had sold that last month. If it was his manager, it would condense the report down and show him what each of the salespeople had sold that month.
Right.
If it was the regional sales manager, it would condense it down. So this is what the areas had sold. And it would also include information. So it would do calculations. It would show whether this was up on the previous month, whether it was down, whether they'd hit their targets on various other things. And the sales director, when he actually saw this, he said to the MD, I must have this.
Right.
How much are you going to charge me for it? And the MD sort of panicked and said, £5,000? And the guy literally wrote him a cheque there and then and said, you made a big mistake, he said, because if you'd said 20, I'd have paid that.
Paid that as well.
Because this report was so valuable to them, because the information it gave
was so specific.
Was so specific.
I get that. I'm late for the news, Tony. I'm late for the news. So finally, the line coming out of Whitehall is that they are going to alter how long and how close someone has to be to another app user to be considered a coronavirus risk. That's all we've got so far. Sounds feasible to you?
It's possible. It's possible, but to be honest, I don't think that's going to make that much of a difference.
Because you could be on you could be on either side of a wall and still be very close to each other.
But basically, they need to go back to basics. Check out your master data. Go through it. Check it all.
Oh, it all comes back to the master data, and indeed, all of the problems that we've had coronavirus all come back to a word that sounds a little bit like master data. Broadcasting to you live from a country where the Prime Minister has called upon us to use our personal responsibility in the context of the loosening of lockdown, and was photographed last night in the back of a car without his mask on, while his close protection officer and driver in the front of the car were both wearing theirs. Simon's in Banbury. Back to the pinging app, Simon. What would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James.
Hello.
Great show, by the way.
Thank you.
I listen pretty much every day.
Good man.
One of the few voices of sanity in a world gone mad.
You're very kind.
About the app. My daughter was pinged by the app last week, and I was sat in my office downstairs and heard this sort of scream of anguish from the bedroom upstairs, and immediately assumed that there was a spider or something like that on the wall. So, armed myself going upstairs And there she was, and I said, "What is it?" And she said, "I've just been pinged by the app and told to self-isolate." The problem was for her. I mean, she's religiously followed the rules with regard to the app. She uploaded it on. She's only 18. She uploaded it onto her phone. She's been checking into venues as and when she's gone out with her friends. Not all of her friends have been. You know, she's very much sort of done her own thing on that front.
Yeah.
And she feels like she's been penalised and punished for that because she was due to go away on holiday with her friends. First holiday away on her own with a group of friends in Bournemouth just for the weekend. And she was pinged on the Thursday before she was due to go away.
Hence the howl of anguish.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you know, so we sort of, I sort of sat down with her and tried to sort of calm her down and talk her through what was going on, although I didn't really understand it myself. But, you know, two things surprised us when we sort of looked at the situation. The first one was that she was actually only being asked to self-isolate for 6 days, not 10.
Okay.
And so there was clearly, if that's the case, there was clearly a period of sort of 4 days or so when she was potentially walking around when she should have been self-isolating.
Yes.
The other thing was that we discovered that you can actually, you know, go into the app and you can trace back potentially where the contact was made.
Right.
And,
yes.
when we did that, we traced it back the 10 days to the 25th, and she had been to lunch in a restaurant with her mother, and we figured that's where the contact had been made. Now, the really surprising thing about that was when we looked at all of the various venues where she checked into, the system seems to have assumed that she was there for 6 hours.
Right.
Now she went for lunch at 1:30, and they were there for one o'clock,
lunchtime.
and they were there for no more than an hour and a half. So they left about 2:30. And so you kind of
she's not a journalist then.
Yeah, definitely not. No. But the app said that she checked out at 7:30.
Oh Lordy. Okay.
So you know you're left sort of thinking, well, hang on, this person who has correctly reported to the system that they have been identified as you know, that they were COVID positive, if you like, might have arrived an hour or two, might have arrived at the same restaurant an hour or two after she'd actually left.
It's incredible.
Yeah,
Every call today practically has added to the idea that they've now reached the point where they are losing the faith and the support of people who are using common sense and personal responsibility, and more than that, they're abiding by the rules. They're the ones who are being most let down by what we've heard today, like your daughter.
That's the point, James. You know, and you know, she's due to go away in a couple of weeks with her boyfriend, you know, on a weekend away. And she's now thinking, "There's absolutely no way I'm going to run the risk of having to cancel yet another weekend away." You know.
And would you normally? You'd probably challenge her on that, would you? But
yeah, well, we did challenge her. I mean, you know, to be fair, her immediate reaction, she was so distraught, was,
yes.
I'm going to ignore it. You know, that's it. I'm fed up. You know, that's it. I'm playing by the rules, and now I'm being punished for it. All my friends don't do what I do, and they're free to go. But, you know, she's a rational person, and she was able to see, you know, ultimately she knows what's right and what's wrong. And so, you know, speaking to her and chatting through it, we were able to sort of, you know, realise that it was the right thing to do, albeit, you know, the most painful thing to have to do. You know, when we sort of talked it through, one of the big issues we can see anyway with regards to the app is that there's no checkout facility. So you're asked to check into a place, but you're not asked to check out.
Yes.
So the system doesn't actually know when you've left. And going forward, if they are looking at, you know,
that would be one of the things they could tweak.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You think so? Yeah, I would have presumed that it just happened automatically, that it somehow followed you. Probably quite naively, because if you have to go to the trouble of checking in, then you obviously should go to the trouble of checking out. But that's neither a requirement nor a possibility. And if it's happened to you, you may be late for the break, but if it's happened to your daughter, it's probably happened to hundreds of thousands, or at least tens of thousands of people. Oh, happy days. Well, not happy days, but there you go. So that is an hour and 45 minutes on this, and still taking new calls with new problems. And I must conclude the conversation by reminding you that Dido Harding was in front of the Select Committee yesterday, claiming that it had all been a great success. Oh, Jesus, Mary and Joseph and the wee donkey.